evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 5:45 p.m. Besides David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access, is there anyone else here recording this meeting? Okay. I would like to make a note that for those of you that are on, is Zoom available? Zoom is available, but you may have better audio if you log on to our YouTube channel, live streaming. Aaron, do we have participants online? Okay. We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bontempi. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Patrick Kiernan.
Present.
Lisa Murray.
Here.
Laura Ride.
Here.
Michelle Boudreaux. Aye. Here. Do you please stand? Sean, will you just note the reading?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, so we will go right into our discussion on the FY24 budget. Aaron?
We'll begin with the presentation? Okay. Alrighty, we are up and running. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope everybody found seats. There are copies of the presentation out front. And a lot of this, if you've attended some of the prior budget presentations, is a little bit redundant, so I will flip through some things maybe a little quicker than in the past. To begin with, one of the focuses of our budget is around our district 5-year strategic plan. This is the start of the implementation of that plan. As we move in, we have 3 budgeted strategic initiatives that we feel are important to fund this year. The first is, Aaron, are you going through the slides? Oh, yeah. One more. One more down. Yep. So we have 3 major initiatives that we're kicking off this year. The first is curriculum councils that are actually already underway this year. We are in the process of looking at vendors to update our website, and we anticipate some outcomes from our equity audit. Keep in mind, when we originally presented this included 5 items at a total cost of $250,000, understanding the pressures on the budget. We've cut those down pretty significantly. Keep in mind at least 2 of those items are actually underway. The first 2 and then the equity audit outcomes are really going to be fairly inevitable. So then we thought we'd look at the increases to our assessment over time, what that history looks like. So if you look, our overall average increase has been 2.29%. If you track with general education costs, this is really, our budget process has been kicking the can down the road year after year after year. But I think it's important also to talk about, a lot of people raise these questions, about why, say, our budget looks higher than some of the other districts in the region. So when you talk about Long Meadow, East Long Meadow, Ludlow, Munson, the school districts around us, some of them may be comparable size, even West Springfield, but there are additional costs that as a regional school district we absorb into our budget. That includes health insurance for employees and retirees. That, just those 2 items alone have a price tag over $6 million, for example. So it's really hard to compare a municipal school district budget to a regional school district budget, just sort of to be fair and even. So one of the things we've started doing this year is sort of figuring out who do we compare to and who should we compare ourselves to when we're looking at student achievement, when we're looking at finances, when we're looking at funding and things like that. So DESE actually, one more down there? DESE actually does this for us a little bit. They actually set up these dark cohorts of similar school districts. So if you see, there are 11 school districts on that list. We have 10 that compare to us. 4 of the districts in our cohort are regional school districts. So we thought from a financial standpoint, we'd start by looking at how we compare to those other 3 districts. So if we look at 3-year average assessment increases for these 3 comparable districts, we see that Dayton-Rehoboth from 2019 to 2021 had an average increase for 3 years of 5.38%, Freetown Lakeville, Whitman-Hanson, and then we're at 2.08% average for 3 years. That's significantly below those other 3 districts. Again, 3 other districts that compare very equivalently to us in terms of populations, size, students served. So then we also think to ourselves, well, let's look at how those school districts are structured. And this is a starting point. I don't want people to feel like this is a finishing point, but we want to start comparing ourselves structurally to what's the right size, what's the right structure, how we look. So when we look at teachers per 100 students, we fall a little bit at the low end of this group that we're in, this cohort, with Whitman-Hanson a little bit below us. When we look at special education teachers, our special education teachers are slightly below Whitman-Hanson, and again, slightly below the averages. But then when we move on and look at paraprofessionals, numbers of paraprofessionals, we're on the high end. So we're not sure. We're thinking about what's the right mix of teachers and paraprofessionals, adults with students, things like that. And then we get into, and this comes up a lot when we come up to these budget meetings, what does our district leadership look like? So we talked about that a couple different times, and this is another example of where we stand relative to these other districts. You'll notice Dayton-Rehoboth doesn't seem to have any school leaders. I think that's probably just a reporting issue for them. They must have principals, they must have people like that. But that's all baked into probably that district instructional leaders. So if you look at where we stand from a district admin standpoint, that's that lower item. Again, when we compare ourselves out against other districts, we're not asking to increase our district admin, but I think we compare pretty favorably in terms of our overhead costs. And then we get into student support, and this raises other questions that we will look at in the next year around what's the right mix of student support staff per 100 students district-wide. Obviously, we might want to cast a wider net than this and look out at other districts and see what they're doing. Oh, thank you, John. Am I at least talking loud enough for everyone out there? Yeah? Okay, great. They can't hear on Zoom? Oh, they should probably get on YouTube then, huh? I don't know what to say.
No, I know.
Yeah. Okay. So then when we look at, let's compare ourselves not just to this small cohort of schools, but let's look at the statewide average. When we talk about all regional districts in the state of Massachusetts, this is a 3-year average of regional assessments across the state. So going back 2021, 2020, 2019, you'll see that our numbers were at 2.62%, 2.76, and then 1.04%, which must have been a tough year. The statewide averages for assessments, that's every regional district statewide, 3.87%, 3.74%, 3.84% for a blended average of 4.15%. Almost, 2 full percentage points higher, almost twice the state average. So when we're looking at our own budget, though, and we're dialing into our costs, what are the major drivers when we're talking about what's impacting our budget this year the most? Contractual salaries, we have a pretty normal increase to contractual salaries. We close all of our 5 contracts with teachers, paras, custodians, admin assistants, and food services workers. A little bit higher than maybe typical, but not out of the state of normal. So we anticipate that going up by about 1.1 million. The big piece that's a challenge for us this year is out-of-district costs. So you may have seen us talk about the state allowing for out-of-district private placements to increase their costs by 14% across the board. So every single private out-of-district placement for special education students has a minimum increase. So that's not even the maximum they could increase their costs. They can request higher increases, have a minimum. If you look at the very next slide, we'll skip it over. This is the actual letter from the OSD. So
you know, if you're thinking maybe, you know, we're kind of making this up or what have you, you know, they absolutely did this. So about $300,000+ of those out-of-district costs is just in this 14% increase. Other items that are increasing substantially, utilities. The very next slide after the OSD slide is a slide on utilities. I won't dwell on that, but the high increases in utility costs. Substitutes we've talked about before. Over the past 2 years, we have doubled our total substitute days. So whether it's COVID or what have you, when I talk to other people in the human resources space, no one's really sure whether that is still a result of COVID or it could be something more permanent, right? So we are pressuring parents, don't send your kids to school with a fever and a couple Advil anymore, right? You need to keep them home. So as we do that, people aren't also coming to school to work sick anymore. So there may be a trend going forward for people to tend to take more time off, and that might just be the new normal we're living in. So we need to budget for that. We tried not to step it up too much this year, but we know those increases are probably coming, and we'll watch that carefully. Transportation, you'll see some conversation about reconfiguring our transportation later. We have a couple increases for needs to special education programming, a relatively small increase to health insurance. Last year, our health insurance increase was probably 3 times this. So we worked with Scantic Valley this year and held them to a 2% increase to health insurance costs. You'll see the strategic planning impacts, as well as Hamden County retirement. We have a number of staff who are in Hamden County retirement. That increase was 4.5%. Again, another increase that we can't control that's pretty significant. So I'll skip over the next 2 slides that have to do with OSD and utilities. And we'll get into a quick conversation about transportation reconfiguration. So right now, our school district uses a 2-tier model. The first tier, the first run in the morning, is Minnechaug and Wilbraham Middle School. Tier 2 includes the 3 Wilbraham Middle School elementary schools and Green Meadows School. So they are all those 2 separate capacities. If we do a 3-tier model, we would have 3 separate levels to that. We would have an early run, a middle run, and a late run. Right now, we're looking at 3 different possible configurations. I think we'll talk about those at another time, but we're working with principals and other administrative staff as well as Lower Pioneer Valley to figure that out. Lower Pioneer Valley anticipates that we can reduce 5 buses and save about $200,000 doing that. So it's about $40,000 a bus. So that's pretty significant savings, and when we think about that in terms of personnel, it's really hard for us not to want to consider this option. And that $200,000 is baked into this budget. We put that forward as what we need to do to make this budget work for this year. So when we get down to it, we come up to a proposed budget of $53,006,104. That is an increase of $2,024,878 and 3.97%. I know John has shared a memo with school committee talking about other increases that other school districts are proposing and putting forward. I also have access to a spreadsheet of a number of potential and proposed budget increases. The average this year is around 6% for school districts. So we're on the low end of that when we think about that and what towns are having proposed.
Just a quick question. In the previous budget sheets that we were looking at, this presentation that we gave to Wilbraham and Hamden, we had it at $53,295,334.
Yes.
So I understand $200,000 coming from the transportation reconfiguration, but what about the $89,000+?
We've had a couple things, small items, edge our way.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want. I mean, some of them are personnel items, things like that, so I don't want to.
Oh, the 5 FTEs versus the 3.5 FTEs?
No, those are all on ESSER. Those are all ESSER positions. So we've had some turnover that's resulted in projected savings. I can leave that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I think we've talked a little bit before that this budget will also, and this really we don't have much choice in regards to. We are winding down our ESSER funds over the next 2 years, and we just don't have the funding to keep some of the additional positions we added through ESSER. I think we were very clear that we added those through ESSER only, and we're working on winding those down. I won't dwell on the next slide. Are we?
We're having problem with the sound.
Yeah. So if we go down, the next slide is really just a comparison of our district and West Springfield, looking at our Chapter 70 dilemma. I've explained this a few times. I won't get into a lot of detail on it. But one of our challenges is we're in what's called a hold harmless situation on Chapter 70, and arguably other state aid. So almost a third of our budget is based in state aid in some form or another. And that state aid effectively comes in at a 0% increase each year, which means that the proportion, the other 2/3 or so that the towns pick up, they have to pick up the difference in what the state isn't picking up when we do that. So this is just a quick comparison of a couple of us with another district. The next slide gets into our shifting trends in low-income populations. Low income is one of many sort of special populations that quite simply has a higher cost associated with it. We've talked about that a little bit. I think I shared some data in prior years that on average, low-income students typically cost about 30% more than your typical non-low-income student, your general population student. And you can see how our trends for low income statewide as well as our district, they're increasing drastically, which is something that drives up costs. The costs of dealing with that can be substantial. So when we get into it and down to the brass tacks, we come out to there, proposed assessments. So our proposed assessments to each town, Hamden is $8,637,948. To Wilbraham, $29,399,393. I won't get into the details of what all those other items are, but they're components of their total budget and the total assessment cost. So I have slides indicating the changes to each aspect. You will see that transportation assessment, because of the reconfiguration of transportation being proposed, and the fact that transportation did come in a little lower than we initially expected, we will actually have a decrease in overall transportation costs this next year anticipated. These other items come directly from the assessment, and these are just a compilation of the various percentage changes in each category. For Wilbraham, and then Hamden, the very next slide. Little information on where our money comes from. So this is a graph that kind of explains, if you look between the Wilbraham assessment in orange and the Hamden assessment in green, but we need to get to that slide. That is a substantial portion. That's, 2/3 of our budget, as I talked about. We do have Chapter 78 that's fairly significant. We do have transportation reimbursement that we expect to get every year based on our transportation costs as a regional district. We do put forward some excess and deficiency funds to help support the budget. And then we have two very small pieces, Medicare, that help support the budget. We receive Medicare reimbursement for students who need treatments, as well as a very small amount of interest we receive for the money we hold in the bank. So we put that forward. And then where do we expect to come out on expenses? This is, again, the vast majority of our money goes directly to instructional services and/or student services. So if you look at $28 million in direct instructional service, other school services at $4.8 million, $2.9 million in out-of-district placements. Fixed costs, when I talked about health insurance and retirement, the bulk of those fixed costs, $8.8 million, are absolutely uncontrollable. Those are retirement costs for our staff, health insurance for our staff, retiree health, and a few other smaller types of insurance. But by and large, that is completely uncontrollable. Operations and maintenance, keeping the buildings up, keeping them clean, building maintenance, plowing, things like that. So again, those two numbers match. We have a budget of $53 million and we have sources. Finally, in addition to these costs, Minichog has been around for a little over 10 years now. Minichog is beginning to show its age. We have some costs associated with running this building that are capital related. Right now, we're lucky, a lot of these are technology related, so we're not looking at replacing a roof, we're not looking at replacing boilers, things like that. We are looking at updating some wireless access points. We're looking at projectors, monitors, camera system. Additionally, if anyone's familiar, we have some issues and concerns with the second floor railing here, and that's something we'd like to add some safety to. We are looking to put that out to bid as soon as we have an identified source of funding. And then each year, we inevitably end up with some need to add mini-split air conditioning units to some classrooms. That comes with a cost. Many of those are student need related. So students with specific needs may need, air conditioning and also humidity issues as we get in August, September, and June. So total of these projects comes to $428,000, and you'll see there's a share for Hamden and a share for Wilbraham split there. I want to reiterate, this is beyond the operating budget that we've just shared. These are capital items that are above and beyond, but these are needs of the school. So we thought we'd share a few interesting items that kind of are add-ons to, I think, what we've shared before. I'm not going to read this verbatim, but this is a little conversation coming from superintendents across the state. So again, not just Hamden-Wilbraham Regional School District facing these challenges. Budgets that are, we're dealing with inflation rates that are 8-9% just statewide, and an operational services division that has increased the budgets for out-of-district special education private placements by 14%. It's also really important that you will hear the state talk a lot about the additional funding that's in the budget. A lot of that is Student Opportunity Act related. We do not qualify for any Student Opportunity Act funds. It's very unlikely that we ever will. So that becomes a real challenge. Only 1/3 of the districts in the state get Student Opportunity Act funds. So that's a big challenge for the other 2/3 of the districts statewide. So MASS, the superintendent's group statewide, has a few recommendations. I won't go too deeply into all of them. The first is to provide a supplemental budget to support that 14% increase they gave to out-of-district private placements. The second is to fully fund the circuit breaker program. So currently, the circuit breaker program is typically funded at 75% of expected claims. The goal would be to bring that up to 90%, and that would increase the state budget by $70 million. So then when we look at what might happen this legislative session, the next item, increasing circuit breaker from 75 to 90%, this would net our school district $180,000 based on out-of-district placements. That's a significant amount of money for us. If they were to increase special education transportation reimbursement, This one's a little harder to estimate, but I'm thinking we would receive about $80,000 in addition. And then changing the approved cost threshold, so this gets into a little bit of the wonky nature of circuit breaker claims, but we received claims for money over about $46 million. They're proposing taking it down to about $37,000 per student. This would impact us a net $150,000. So if you combine these three items, we're looking at about $400,000 if legislature changed the circuit breaker program just this little bit. So finally, their final recommendation is a little longer term and wonkier, but it directly opens the foundation budget formula. It would adjust permanently the special education increment. I don't think this would impact us. Again, we're in that hold harmless status on Chapter 70, and we are very significantly in it, so it would be hard for us to reach that threshold. But over time, it would bring us closer to reaching that threshold. So I think in the long run, 10 years down the road, this might change things. It might actually result in more Chapter 70. So then we get into, if you're someone who lives in town or is a town official, why in the world you should care about the school budget. These are two ads from Zillow. They're only available on separate sites, and Aaron's going to kind of share those with us. These struck a chord with me a number of years ago. They come from 2012, 2013. These were some of the earlier Zillow ads. This first one, we'll just let them play. Do we have volume? Do we have volume, Aaron? Sorry.
Okay, turn it down, the reverb down.
Oh, okay. Yep. And then pull it back. So it may have been really hard to hear, but in the opening seconds of that ad, she is showing him sort of their dream house. The very first thing he says is, "Did you see the school rating?" And instantly that house is off the table for them. Can we go to the next one?
This is the first day of my life. So I was born right in the doorway. Out in the rain, so everything changed. That's when blankets on the beach.
You're not just looking for a house. You're looking for a place where you're going to have. Zillow.
Hard to see given the lighting. Sorry about
Starting an
that.
online store is easier than you think.
Again, I don't know if you noticed, the big pop-up of where your child will graduate, very important. Off to the right-hand side were the school ratings for that house. So two very early Zillow ads when they were investing heavily in their advertising early on. They spent a lot of money on these ads, and their research determined one thing that families care about, and that's school ratings. There was nothing about potholes up there, was there? Right? Neither of them was worried about how many potholes were up front, but they were very, very concerned with the school ratings. So moving on, and that lighting's just awful. So I guess, when we look at this, great schools is what Zillow uses. This is our district along with the I think we just have to live with the lighting.
First.
You press this
So, anyhow, these are items. Great Schools pops up on Zillow. Anyone looking for a house, these are going to pop up instantly for people. The school rating. We can go to the next slide because it's hard to see all of those ratings. So I think it's really important to think about. Someone once said, "Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value." Our budget is about the schools. That's what we care about. So it's much more than allocating resources. It's a statement of our core values. It's our chance as individuals and as a committee to tell the community where your values lie. And with that, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone have any questions?
I'm just curious where the E&D falls into the budget. And like, so, I know we apply some of it.
Mm-hmm.
So after the application of some of the E&D, what the two towns contribute, what is
Yep.
that difference?
So we're putting $850,000 of E&D in this year into the pot. Last year we put in almost $1 million. You'll recall late in the game, the town of Wilbraham altered their budget, what they were voting to provide us. So rather than cut positions or impact students on the fly and trying to desperately figure things out, we proposed and the school committee accepted an increase to our E&D.
Yep, right. I just wasn't sure based off of that application. So if you apply that to the total number, what's due, what's the money left that we have to try to find?
Define?
Well, like we have to make up, right? So if the town, if we know Wilbraham can only give so much,
Yep.
and we know what percentage Hamden would give, and then you add the E&D,
Right.
what does that that number look like?
So we're, if we were to input the number that Wilbraham gave us into the budget and go with that, we'd be looking at almost $750,000 shortfall.
And now, the way that the budget, the way that the number you had also included the transportation money, the $200,000?
Yes, transportation reimbursement. We actually, the projection from the state is actually $150,000 less than we use. So we receive projections from the state through something called cherry sheets each year. That number came through lower than I expected. So I actually called the state and talked to the deputy commissioner, O'Donnell, and he indicated that they are taking a more conservative approach to how they calculate that this year. And so that number is a little lower than you would expect. So we have increased that number by $150,000 based on Governor Gearley's budget. She's looking to fund regional transportation at 90%. The state's initial is based on a lower percentage, I believe. So we're confident that we will get closer to $1,550,000 rather than the $1.4 million that the state has put in.
Okay.
So I'm comfortable making that leap. That's a bit of a leap, but I'm comfortable making it, knowing what's going to happen.
So will that reduce that $750,000?
That's already in the budget. I've already factored to that. I've
Okay.
already added the $150,000. Yep.
Okay.
Once we factor in the E&D money, how much will be left in our E&D account?
So last year we putting in, almost $1 million. We brought our E&D down to about $1.5 million. So this would cut into that. We will be using a lot of ESSER funds. So as we wind down our ESSER grants, our hope is and plan is to sort of rebuild a little bit of our E&D account through offsetting a lot of our costs onto ESSER funds. So it's a little bit of a balancing game. But knowing that we have last year and this year, or this year and next year of some funding available, we feel good about our ability to do that. Yep.
With the three-tier model, are we still using the same philosophy when it comes to busing, or are we changing our overall philosophy?
when you talk about overall philosophy, I think you mean the number of stops buses make. We have had some initial conversations about, in order for us to get to school on time with 5 fewer buses, we're going to have to be less accommodating of individual bus stops. But we haven't gotten into the detail of exactly which ones would be impacted.
Have we looked in our model at what potential savings would be, and I recognize we're part of LPDC, if we were to outsource transportation, go with an accepted contractor, and I think of the headlines in the Boston Globe 3 weeks ago, the State Inspector General is encouraging the school system in Boston to go after the transportation company because their chronic inability to deliver students on time to schools. So I think about the woes that we have had this year with delivering students on time to schools. Is there potentially savings to be had and the ability to hold people accountable at a greater level than we are holding
I
ourselves?
think your microphone died.
From a cost perspective, I'm going to say that in my experience, I've dealt with a couple different bus companies in my day. LPVEC is relatively cost comparable. I wouldn't expect that we would get tremendous savings from moving to a separate company. They're under very similar, cost constraints. It's very regionalized. Putting out to bid. I mean, we might be of interest if we put out to bid because we don't have another private company. One of the challenges when you put out to bid, though, is you're going to have a company that's going to have to ramp up its capital costs pretty quickly. They're going to have to add X number of buses to meet our needs, and that will be embedded in their quotes. We could look to do that. It certainly would be something we probably would struggle to do for fiscal 24, but we could look at it for fiscal 25 very reasonably if that's what the committee wished to do.
And I was concerned about the accompanying of the buses. I noticed that the youngest children would start getting off the bus at 3:30 to maybe 4:15. Those youngest children then in the middle of winter would be going in the dark.
That's
Sure.
Yes.
No, not yet.
So what are,
I'm concerned.
right, so what are the slippery sides about outsourcing is that we still are part of the collaborative, which means that if we were to outsource, then it would be, potentially a liability onto the bus company, which would then be passed on to us through other programs because they, like so many businesses, they're a corporation. So if their profits go down, then they're going to have to raise their rates in order to make a difference on it. So we talked about this, I think, probably six years ago.
Yeah.
And
5 to 6
we
years.
had talked about doing something with Vanpool. I don't know if they even have, I don't know if they have the capacity to actually do that still to this point. So.
And even the numbers didn't flush out,
Yeah, but it was an interesting discussion, and it did, at the time, Andy Churchill was the head of LPVEC, and it did light a fire under them to reassess how transportation was. And, and it's, again, this year as we look at transportation, right, we're really going to a 2-tier to a 3-tier model. I think it's something that we really, we've always partnered with LPVEC in understanding that we want them to be giving us the best value for our dollar. But I think we need to be a lot more forceful with them as far as making sure that they're up on that. Because the last time they did an adjustment to our busing routes, it was a substantial savings, and we're talking several $100,000 again. And it wasn't anything more than just us bringing up the idea that we might use another bus company. So I think it's something we can look for in the future. We should be on them basically every year.
How many buildings does this have us operating?
How many what?
How many buildings does this budget have us operating?
We have not removed the building from the budget as of yet, so that this is the existing slate. I would definitely say that if the conversation is leaning towards, say, closing something like a Burgess, you know, the cost of moving out of that building, I mean, no matter how you look at it, is going to eat up most of the first year savings. So if we were to imagine that we would save, you know, X thousand dollars, we'd probably spend that moving. And then there's the matter of the lease agreement.
So then the other points, I guess, are more for us to think of as a committee. So I'm struck by the fact that this budget has us removing 5 FTEs. If my math's right, 3.5 of those FTEs are focused on social and emotional. You do the math quickly, that's $65,000 per FTE. If you look at the railing cost, which is $125,000, that's roughly 1.95 FTEs. So here we are saying we're going to spend money on a guardrail, but we're not going to spend money on the fundamental positions that can help prevent a guardrail from being here in the first place. So it's a bit sobering to see that's our approach. And then the other part, just for us to remember as a committee, right, we've had really, I think, 3 overarching things that have guided our budget over the past 6 years, and potentially longer than that. The first one was a return to the middle school model. The second one was small class sizes, especially at the elementary level. And the third was a focus on social and emotional support. So the question that we need to look at when we view this budget is, are we supporting and are we living true to those no longer guidelines that we want to use for our budget?
Can I also ask for you to share the impacts of the shortfall, the budget? Can you share the impacts of the shortfall?
Sure. I also would like to just start by giving some history on this. So we were just talking about the reduction of the positions that are connected to ESSER, which are sort of baked into the pie, which are positions that sadly we don't even feel we're in a position to request at this time, but would still be very helpful for kids. We started this process about 3 months ago with an anticipated increase of over $3 million. In those 3 months, we worked very closely with our partners on the administrative team, with our partners from the towns to try to find any possible way we could to reduce the ask. We were calculated the circuit breaker estimate was over $330,000. Our health insurance came in below estimate, almost another $300,000. Transportation realignment we've been talking about would allow us to reduce our ask another $200,000. As I said, or as Aaron said, we sort of rejiggered the phasing in of some of the strategic plan requests specifically around coaching, save another $150,000. With your support, we reaffirmed our commitment to the METCO, which allowed us to add $130,000 of revenue. We did get our Chapter 70 funds at $25 a student, of $100,000 increase. And then the administrators as a group agreed to forego the compensation they would receive for unused sick days, vacation days. So that was a piece of it. Facilities and retirements and preschool tuition increases, which we'll be talking about later, account for a little bit more than an additional $100,000. However, with all of that and with the number that we've been looking at since last night from Wilbraham, we still have about an $800,000 gap. And I know that it was the desire of everyone for us to be able to find a way to make up that gap without reductions to staff, but there's really just no way to do that. When you're talking about that kind of number, it's a bridge too far. So the impacts of coming to the figure that's been proposed by Wilbraham would be the elimination of 11 paraprofessionals, mostly general education, and 2 teachers in the elementary grades. We, to the point that was made earlier, are trying to prioritize lower class sizes at the elementary level, which is why we would target reductions to paraprofessionals instead. We would try to limit reductions to teachers to higher grades where we feel that higher class sizes, although far from ideal, are somewhat more acceptable than they are with very young kids. So there would be the eliminations in the elementary level for teachers would be mainly in grades 3 through 5. That would result in class sizes swelling to about 27 to 28 per class. There'd be an elimination of a counselor at Green Meadows. There'd be the elimination of Spanish below the 8th grade. At the middle school, a 0.5 reduction of a computer science teacher and a 0.5 reduction of a phys ed teacher or a writer's workshop teacher. As a result, students would have 4 core classes instead of 5 in the middle school model. The elimination of all freshman sports. The elimination of the admin assistant for athletics. Reduction of a high school special education teacher, which would cause the academic support classes to increase to about 7 to 8, which is still within ratios. There would be, probably the larger impact would be on scheduling, because you'd have fewer courses of content support in the schedule. There wouldn't be as many options to move kids to their content support when it bumps up against other classes that also run at the same time. The reduction of 2 physical education teachers at the high school. I think this would require a modification of our graduation policy to allow the principal to give PE credit for participation in athletics or other fitness activities. And because fewer students would be in PE classes, it would mean class sizes in the other non-PE classes would grow slightly because those students would have to have somewhere to go. There'd also be an elimination of our nutrition courses. We'd reduce a high school nurse, a quarter of a position. That would, main impact there would be with screenings. So we probably would have to bring in additional subs to complete height, weight, vision, hearing, screenings, as well as to do concussion compliance. So some of the savings there might be offset by additional substitute costs. We'd also propose increasing parking, student activity, and graduation fees. Some preventative maintenance would be deferred, which could lead to some larger problems later on. Just to give you an idea of what that would mean, probably reorganize and adjust our schedule for non-critical items. We'd, for example, lower inventory of parts needed for repairs. We'd decrease the number of HVAC filter changes in the district. Currently we do 3 to 4 times a year. We'd go down to 2 to 3 times a year. That does have some impact on their quality. It also has some impact on potential long-term repair costs, because as those filters get filled with dust, the motors have to run harder, there's more friction on the belts, and so you get more wear and tear on those mechanical components. We would pull back on the amount of touch-ups we do over the summer. We would probably reduce the amount of mowing that we do over the summer. And we'd run to failure on non-critical equipment. And then at the district level, we reduce district software, supplies, legal services, memberships, and textbook line items. Probably the biggest impact there might be our ability to support the implementation of the new mathematics program, because the largest cut there would be with our textbook line items that we use to supplement schools. We're trying to purchase supplies for kids. And then the elimination of a planned special education program, which would decrease the number of integrated preschool classrooms we have to offer. So, as you can see, the cuts would be beyond challenging. I think they'd be devastating to have to implement. And so I really hope that it doesn't come to that.
John, I just want to mention that for many years we tried to put most of our attention on lowering class size, starting with the youngest children going up, and we were successful with that. And that would be something that I would hope we don't repeat and go backwards.
So, Aaron, one of the line items that we haven't talked about is the fact that there was an increase to our own school committee budget of like $45,000. So has there been any look to that? I know that part of that was originally when we had Kate, when I first got on the school committee, she did a lot of things, but I think we need to take a look at some of that
Okay.
money and see if we can use, I mean, some of these smaller dollar amounts,
Mhm.
I would rather see us really look at what the school committee budget requirement was, because I think it was only a small portion.
Yeah.
But you were budgeting for far more money, and I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody else on the school committee, but I'd rather see those monies go towards students than, potentially other
Yeah.
aspects of what we
So,
need.
Yeah. Previously, all of the minutes and all of everything was taken by the prior admin to the superintendent for a stipend that was well below the value of work she did, less than a third the value of the work she did. Now we're using other sources to do that, and that's, taking minutes, things like that. I know, some of the professional development for school committee members is in there as well. MASC, things like that, is embedded into that budget as well. So I mean, I looked at, what was spent this year, and I have to presume that.
And that includes the conference, correct?
Yeah, that includes the conference costs, yeah. Again, though, I mean, when we're talking about the dollars in this budget, we're not
Sure.
talking about very much
Sure,
in
but
the
I
scheme
mean-
of things. If we have to make cuts and the school committee is willing to put that on the table,
Well, I know that in some of the literature's come out about a lot of the cuts that you and the MASC had said that,
Mhm.
when you look at how policies are written, the number of people we send to the conference,
Mhm.
considering how tight we need to keep the budget, we should be looking at ourselves to say, do we really need to be sending 3 or 4 people? Who should really be going? And I think that's something we have to look at ourselves on
Mhm.
when we have to make that decision in November.
Well, I think with respect to the conference, I would push back heavily on that only because if you actually participate in the conference, if you go and you see the programs that are offered and you have the opportunity to network with not only other school committee members, but other superintendents, you get to meet a lot of people, you get to understand sort of the strengths and weaknesses in your own district and how things can be changed. I mean, the years that I went, I picked up a lot in those conferences. I wouldn't undersell that dual conference. I think it's a great resource. I would encourage more people to go so that they can see sort of how valuable that experience can be. It's like anything with education.
The potential cuts, if we had to be at the budget that's provided thus far by Wilbraham. On the increasing of fees, it says it would disproportionately impact low-income families. I thought that low-income families, free and reduced lunch, had a correlation to fees somebody's charged. Is that not accurate?
It's interesting that you bring that up because we're in the midst of the equity audit, and one of the things that we were asked to provide documentation about was sliding scales that we have available for students with need, and it's very informal. I haven't been able to find that there's a definite rule. It seems to be sort of, if someone presents with a need, there's a fund of funds that a principal or another administrator can go to in order to help offset the costs. But it's not done in a systematic way. So if a person is uncomfortable about bringing forward their need, they might not get that fee reduction that they could be eligible for.
Okay. And then the other question, right? When you look at a budget, I would think that the number one thing that we do is how do we take from non-customer facing or non-student facing positions, programs, etc. When we look at some of the things that are included in here, it would appear that some of those positions, and I get that it's uncomfortable talking about positions, are farther removed from a student than some of what we are proposing to cut in the budget today. What is the rationale to say this is more important and positions that we've chosen to cut already?
So just to talk a little bit about the process that we used to go through for the cuts, I think is probably the best way to answer that. So when we got to the point of thinking that we were probably cutting to $800,000 for tonight, hopefully that's not the final goal, what we did was we looked at each of the cost center on the basis of the FTEs that are associated with the cost center and asked the people managing their cost centers to come forward with the cuts that they felt would be least impactful. So that's why you see it's basically spread across the district. Part of that is trying to make sure that the impact is not disproportionate on any one place, which is one way of trying to mitigate the cost, the impact of the overall cuts. The other thing is allowing the people who are in charge of their programs talk about what they think would be least impactful. Not saying that any person who was part of that conversation said, yes, I think we will be fine without these positions. They just said if we are in the position of having to get to this number to reach our fair share of the cuts, this is where we think our cuts would have to go.
You might call that one.
It's on, you're talking into this, you're talking into this.
He's just sitting there laughing at you, so.
Least impactful to education, least impactful to the budget. How are we defining least impactful?
I think we were looking for things that had high impact to the budget in the sense of being able to come up with big chunks of money we were looking for with having the least impact to the students and the education that we're able to provide for them.
So when people say, what are you doing in the budget? Are you looking at things in the budget? Are you cutting everything that you could cut, right? Then we come up, if we get this $800,000 hole that we have to deal with, and we just presented what we would have to cut to maintain that. None of those things we want to do. None of those things we should do, right? So you just have to know that the budget as presented, it's a very lean budget, all right? That there's not like, oh, it's $50,000, I can just get it from here and another $100,000 from here. No, that's not. This budget is meticulous in allocating of the funds, and proof of that is this document here, which is saying how much money and what we would have to cut in order to get that money, and it's painful.
So, as Sean was saying, when you look at any budget, you have to remember that a budget is just a list of estimates, right? You don't actually know how much stuff is going to cost. So, at the end of every budget year, you may end up, we usually try to end up with an excess, because the last thing that you want to do in a school budget or in your own personal budget is to wind up with a deficit. So, we're providing best guesses here in terms of the budget. Now, in terms of looking at other budgeting items like the school committee budget, line item, et cetera, I mean, you could make arguments to say that, but there have been times when I've been on the committee, and I've been here for going on my 9th year, where, the school committee expenses range higher than $40,000. So, again, we're just trying to provide a reasonable estimate of where that number is. But looking at everything that is listed on there, to me, that's breathtaking. There's no other way to say it. And I could not, with a good conscience, as an elected member of the school committee, as a person that's supposed to stand up for education in our community and be a voice for education, to look at what those cuts would do, I cannot in good conscience support that. Make a motion that we present a budget for the school committee for proposed fiscal year 24 at $53,006,104.
Second.
We have to do the hearing first.
What's that?
We're not quite there yet, let's do the hearing first.
Oh,
So
we haven't logged in here. Oh, we haven't. Okay.
Yeah. So,
My apologies.
We'll hold on.
One second.
We'll go back to. quickly, we could just, there's a few things that impact the budget in the subcommittee report, so if we could quickly go through those, and then we'll move on to the budget hearing. So, Chair, do you have anything to report from subcommittees? I will begin on the planning subcommittee. So the planning committee met to review 136 possible options for reconfiguring the district to add the space issue to take advantage of the underutilized spaces. We were able to reduce these options by eliminating configurations that included grade band schools serving a single grade. So based on this list, we organized it by the type of changes that would be needed to implement these changes based on the regional agreement. So our goals for the reconfiguration, when we looked at these options, included 1, to alleviate overcrowding, 2, maximize space, 3, reducing transitions, so limiting the frequency of switching schools, and 4, cost savings. So when we went through this, some of the possible configurations with no changes to the regional agreement, we came up with one option. I'm not sure if you have this in your book, but so the configuration would look like at Mile Creek, pre-K to 1, Green Meadows would be pre-K to 8, Stony Hill would be grades 2 to 3, Sewell Road 4 to 5, TWB, special programming, WMS, 6th to 7th grade, and Minnetonka Regional High School, grades 8 to 12. Possible configurations with regionalization in grades 8 to 12. So we came up with 2 options. The first being Mile Creek being pre-K to 1, Green Meadows being pre-K to 7, Stony Hill, grades 2 to 3, Sewell Road, 4 to 5, TWB, special programming, WMS, 6 to 7, Minnetonka Regional High School, 8 to 12. Second option being pre-K to 1 at Mile Tree, Green Meadows pre-K to 7, Stony Hill, grades 2 through 5, so 3 per grade. Sewell Road would be grades 2 through 5, 4 per grade. No programming at TWB, WMS, grades 6 to 7, and Minnetonka would be grades 8 to 12. So possible configurations with the district regionalized in grades 7 through 12, we came up with 2 options. The first being Mile Tree pre-K to 1, Green Meadows pre-K to 6, Stony Hill grades 2 to 3, Sewell Road 4 to 5, WMS 6 to 7, Minnetonka 8 to 12. Second option being at Mile Tree pre-K to 1, Green Meadows pre-K to 6, Stony Hill grades 2 through 5, 3 per grade, Sewell Road grades 2 through 5, 4 per grade, WMS 6 to 7th grade, and Minnetonka grades 8 to 12. Possible configurations with regionalization in grades 6 through 12, we came up with 4 options. The first being pre-K to 1 at Mile Tree, pre-K to 5 at Green Meadows, Stony Hill grades 2 through 5, that's 3 per grade, Sewell Road 2 through 5, 4 per grade. No programming at TWB, Wolverhampton Middle grades 6 to 7, and Minnetonka 8 through 12. Second configuration would be Mile Tree, pre-K to 1, Green Meadows, pre-K to 5, Stony Hill, with grades 2 through 5, 3 per grade, Sewell Road, grades 2 through 5, 4 per grade, TWB, 6th to 7th grade, Minnetonka, grades 8 through 12. Third option would be Mile Tree, pre-K to K, Green Meadows, pre-K to 5, no programming at Stony Hill, Sewell Road would be grades 1 through 5, 3 per grade, Wolverhampton Middle would be 1 through 5, 4 per grade. TWB, grades 6 to 7. Minnetonka, grades 8 through 12. And the fourth option is Mile Tree, pre-K to 1. Green Meadows, pre-K to 5. Stony Hill, grades 2 through 3. Sewell Road, 4 to 5. Wolverhampton Middle, 6 to 7. Minnetonka, grades 8 through 12. And then the final configuration with regionalizations in grades 5 to 12 would be, we had one option. Mile Tree would be pre-K to K. Green Meadows would be pre-K to 4. Stony Hill would be grades 1 through 4, 3 per grade. Sewell Road would be grades 1 through 4, 4 per grade. Wolverhampton, no programming at TWB. And Wolverhampton Middle would be grades 5 through 7, and the high school would be grades 8 to 12. We also kept in mind one of the reasons our goals were for transitions, reducing transitions, is that studies have shown that every time a change happens, it can set students back 1 year. And grade band school help keep content area teachers together and offer consistency in learning experiences. So we plan to include in our next meeting union representatives, so teachers and paras, and its administration from buildings and director levels to our next meeting. And that is on Tuesday, March 27th at 5:30 in the district conference room. We also plan to meet with the advisory from Hamden, FinCom from Wilbraham, both select boards from Hamden and Wilbraham, in school committee. We also plan to meet with capital planning and facilities, PTO members, school councils, advisory boards, parents, stakeholders, and community members in our future meetings.
If I can also just say that these are just, we narrowed down I think it actually came up to about 140 different options. We narrowed it down to those options because they fit best into our 3 criteria, but nothing is off the table, right? So we're trying to do our homework so that when we present it, we have the best to look at. But if something comes up and the community decides differently, all options are still on the table.
So when you look at, sorry, go ahead, Charles. No, go ahead.
Well, I'm concerned about the middle school. We worked very hard to get it to be a true middle school, because it wasn't for several years, to have it not be a true middle school anymore, and to put 8th grade at the high school. I don't even know where they do lunch, because right now I think, Steve was here, maybe we can correct him, they start lunch at like 9:30, quarter to 10, because it's so tight in the cafeteria. I'm just very concerned about space and about middle school model, which was supposed to be the best way to take those age groups and educate them.
If I might, I would say that you're absolutely right that 6 through 8 are the traditional middle school grades. And there will be a number of challenges with any of the models. We haven't looked into the administrative feasibility of any of these because getting to this point has taken days and days of research. When we get down to, say, 3, that might be things that people are seriously interested in. I think we're talking much more time in understanding all the nuances that would be required of all of those. Things like scheduling, things like lunches, things like what types of new furniture you might have to buy depending on where you're moving things. So that would, I think, have to be presented to the community and to the school committee before asking to make a final decision on any of those options. We're just sort of in the phase right now of trying to narrow the universe of options from over 100 to a small number that may be worthy for further study.
Thank you.
You walked through what guided it. Can you walk through those again, please?
Alleviate overcrowding, reducing transition, maximizing space, and cost saving.
So nowhere in there is academic achievement. So I struggle that we're looking at it basically from a fiscal lens only, and then potentially reducing transition, which we're saying is better for students. I think the first part should be academic achievement, and then below that comes these other categories that you use. So just something to consider as you look at that moving forward. Thank you.
Any other questions? Move on to finance and operations. Bill, are you all set?
Yeah, I'm seeing it all right here.
All right, Lisa, collaborative.
Oh, wait, because we have another meeting on the agenda, so one of the things I think is important about when we do the subcommittee updates is if there's another meeting posted, letting people know when the next subcommittee meeting is.
Monday night.
So do we really,
Monday night, 5 p.m., which is usually in budget season, so from January until we get the budget, finalize what the budget is, Monday nights.
so we really need to meet Monday to recap this meeting? That's all it's on the agenda.
It depends on what happens tonight. I mean, I don't see huge. Yeah, but one way we might not have to, or another way we might have to.
Okay, so I make sure we have that option.
Yes, we do.
Understand that that's,
The meeting's been posted, so, it's always
a
easier.
lot of talking about budget this week.
So it's on the schedule for March 20th.
March, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Monday.
This
Oh, no.
coming Monday at 5 o'clock.
Okay. These are the collaborative.
We had our meeting yesterday and it lasted less than 10 minutes because not everybody could come. So all we did was approve travel authorizations for teachers and students to attend various state conventions. And then last week, we were able to do a tour of CTEC and see their vocational education and their special education programs. And it was really nice to see what they have to offer there. And definitely helped me understand better everything that they have to offer over at the collaborative.
Any questions? Thank you. I have nothing to report on the preparation for LPVAC or negotiation subcommittee, so where are we with the policy subcommittee?
It's quick. We had a meeting, what day is it? We had a meeting yesterday. It was riveting, lots of discussion on graduation requirements, which will come at the next meeting because it was within the 24-hour window. We will have another meeting on April 6th at 4 o'clock. There's a lot of, the MASC has pushed through a lot of policies that should be reviewed and some that can be removed or we should look at, but for tonight, I'd like to have this stand as the third reading and to take the vote on accepting policies IJLA, library resources, and JRD for student photographs. Were there any questions since the last two readings? The first reading was February 2nd, the second reading was February 16th, so tonight will be the third and final for approval.
Do you need a motion?
Correct.
I make a motion to accept the third reading of policies IJLA and JRD.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have something on the books?
I'm sorry, it's April 10th at 4 o'clock PM in the district office. Thank you for correcting me. Knew it was around this.
Thank you. Move on to the consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I'd encourage members to sign the warrants, please.
I know, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Didn't sit in.
Motion
Do
carries
we
7.
have to read the donations out loud, right? I think that has to be. I thought it was 500, right? Okay.
That's the 4,000.
That would require a vote.
So we'll come back to that.
Is it in the consent agenda?
It's in the consent agenda.
Then
Sorry.
consent agenda's been approved, so.
Unless you want to say thank you.
You can do that.
I'd like to say that it's voted to accept. So the school committee has voted to accept a donation of $4,000 from the Hands and Minds Club to start the Hands and Minds Club Scholarship Fund. One $500 scholarship will be awarded to a deserving senior for their community service in memory of past lions and their community service. Okay. So we will move on to the public hearing on the HWRSD FY24 budget with questions and answers. Do we have any public comment online? Would anyone in the audience like to make a public comment? Have any questions? Concerns?
Come on, nobody wants to talk to us? We're fun people.
Sure, come on.
Do I have to go to in particular?
No, we'll just make sure you have a microphone. Someone-
This one
someone
works
turn
really
their
well.
mic- Please just state your name.
Hi, I'm Allison Pettit. I am the principal of Mile Tree Elementary School, but I'd like to speak more as a parent. I have 3 students that are in this district. One is at Tool Road, and the other 2 are at Wilbraham Middle School. We moved to Wilbraham, I think we're coming up on 3 years. We moved right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we did move from a town that did not have a middle school model. We had as parents, we had a lot of concerns about sending our students to a school that didn't have that feature. And we were also looking for more educational opportunities for our children. And in moving to Wilbraham, we chose this area specifically. The Zillow ads actually really spoke to me because that's exactly why we moved here, because we were looking for those opportunities. Upon arriving in the middle of COVID, a lot of opportunities were not available, so all of the theater program and school trips and things that happened, particularly at the middle school level, were not available. But as COVID restrictions lifted and those became options, we couldn't have been happier for our children to be able to have access to those types of opportunities. And those are outside of school opportunities, but we have wonderful teachers that are running theater programs, and there are stipends for positions for teachers to want to be able to give so much of their time. My daughter was in the High School Musical Junior production, and her grandparents came. She got flowers, and she just was feeling on top of the world, and that's exactly how every child should feel when they get to come to school and have those amazing opportunities. Those are sort of extracurricular. They've been tubing at Butternut, they've been to see multiple shows, and all of these opportunities are supported by their teachers, which they couldn't be happier to be able to be on the bus, singing Christmas songs all the way to Cirque du Soleil with their teachers and be able to engage with them in that way. In addition to those extracurricular activities, they're pushed in school. Teachers have been able to provide Spanish at 7th and 8th grade level, so my daughter will go into Minnetonka High School next year into Spanish 2. She would love to pursue a medical career, and having the ability to speak a second language, especially Spanish, would be extremely beneficial to that endeavor. My son is very much into technology, and the offerings at Minnetonka will speak to him very, very much. So having those opportunities is really why we came here, and it would be really wonderful to see that continue to be an option for our kids as we, grow our family here and our daughter moves into middle and high school. Thank you.
Why don't we just leave here in case Yeah, it's best.
Hi, good evening. Christine Noonan, 13 Scenic Drive. I'm an educator at Stony Hill. I'm also a parent of 2 boys who went through the school system, K through 12. And I'm going to speak directly to the budget. I 100% agree that we need to invest in our students and fully fund our school budget. As a parent who experienced K through 12, my boys went to college fully prepared, academically, socially, and they're both successful men in their careers. And I owe that to every single teacher, pre-K, actually Michael went pre-K to 12. The other piece of this that we have to consider is we pride ourselves in Hamden-Wilbraham Regional School District of giving an excellent education to all our students, and our students deserve this. We have to have schools and education and curriculum that our students deserve. This budget, by reducing the amount of staff and relationships and integration of curriculum with our students, is going to negatively impact our kids. We're not a mediocre town. We're not a mediocre school district. We're an excellent school district. And we show it and we prove it every single day. I'm a proud member of being an educator here in Hamden-Wilbraham Regional School District. And I know every other teacher feels that same way, pre-K to 12. So I urge the school committee to do whatever they can to do a level budget, support our students and our families for the excellent education that they get here and will get here in perpetuity. So I hope that budget can be level funded. I hope FinCom that's here listens. I hope that our select board is listening to that our schools, our regional school district is a real gem, and we need to protect it and we need to support it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Aaron, is anyone else attending? We will move on to...
Can you just forward along the email from John to at least myself?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Will we send it to finance and to advisor? Yeah.
In the second.
Yep.
100%. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to new business. So the HWRC FY '24 budget, the vote.
So now,
Now you make your motion and.
I would make a motion to school committee. I would like to make the motion that the school committee propose the budget for the FY 2024 school year to be set at $53,006,104.
Second.
Discussion?
I struggle with the budget. I struggle with the budget. One, I don't think it's high enough, right? So if we look at it, we're on, and not disrespectful to anybody here, but we are on a race to mediocrity with the way that we are funding our schools. And so we can talk about being an excellent district, but excellent districts aren't giving the percentages that we've given to education here over the past 4 years. I recognize that we've got fiscal constraints as communities, but there is no, and Aaron, you said last meeting, we're not a business. I would argue we are a business to an extent. We're in the business of educating people, and people want strong schools. A 7, a 6, using some of the Zillow numbers, I think we should be striving to be more than a 7 and a 6, but this budget will keep us as a 7 or a 6 or lower. So I would encourage us to have a higher budget than we have. That being said, if we're only going to go with this budget, we need to take a harder look at some of the operational expenses. So I'm not convinced from what's been shared with us that we have truly looked to strip out every non-student facing expense that we can, and would encourage us to do that between now and the time that we actually have to implement this budget and make sure that it is students receiving. Right now, I think it's 54% of our budget. That's it. 54% of our budget goes to instructional costs. That's it. So 46% of our budget is going to something other than students. That's crazy. So look at your math, right? If you look at it quickly, that's what I'm looking for. 28, 444, 839, 53, 006, 104, 54%. That's not enough. So we need to take a really hard look within that budget if we're going to stay with that number at everything that can come out that doesn't touch a student.
So if I can speak to that a little bit, I have a wife who's an occupational therapist. She falls into the other school services category. Those are needs that our students have. Those are speech, language, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Those are our BCBAs that service students. Those are adjustment counselors that serve students, things like that. So I definitely, on a personal level, lump those with direct student costs. Students who are incapable of remaining in a classroom, who can't hold a pencil, who can't do some of the basic things that students need to do, and need those services. You know, out-of-district services, those are organizations that are providing those instructional services to our children directly, whether it's in our district or not. You know, some things we can't, the fixed costs, I can't change those. Those are health insurance, retirement costs, things like that. You know, I totally appreciate if we can find some efficiencies places, I'm in support of that, but I really want to be careful about how we relay the work that some of our staff does on a day-to-day basis for the benefit of students. Thank you.
You have that in that 63%. You have that in that 63%. If you have your other school services. So we're still talking about a line that's dollar amount and going something other than.
Just piggyback on what you said, it's not enough. 53 is not enough. We will be going backwards. And I think there have been times, very few, there have been times that we've gone to town meeting and brought our needs back and asked for more. And I would be willing to do that rather than cut our legs off.
So, when we look at this budget, this is a big gap, right? This is the 8th year that I've been on the subcommittee. I've never seen a gap this large. And I think it speaks to a couple of things. Number one is it speaks to the extraordinary circumstances that we are facing, not just in the Commonwealth, but all over the country. I mean, inflation costs are running out of control, and the cost of doing business for everything is going up. No thanks to DESE to give OSD a nice 14% bump, but with nothing given to the school districts to offset that. That being said, there are ways that we have to work better as a school committee. Our facility costs are out of control. Like, we really need to drill down on that, and we need to drill down on it this year. And I think that we owe it to the towns of Hamden and Wilbraham, when we come to them with a number like this, that by this time next year, we have a reconfiguration, we have a building utilization plan that not only serves the students to the best of their abilities educationally, but will also be fiscally responsible, and something that will carry us through the next decade. We've dragged our feet on this for far too long. It's time that we put something together, we commit to it. I believe the only way that we're going to be able to do that is finding a way that we can modify the regional agreement, get rid of the K through 6 or the 1 through 6 restriction between Hamden and Wilbraham. That will give us a lot of latitude and flexibility to be able to reconfigure our district. The bigger point is that, again, this is the 8th year that I've been on the subcommittee. It's the 7th I've been chairing it. We have this discussion every single year. And I'd like to remind you that at this time last year, we were sitting before the towns of Hamden and Wilbraham trying to close a $1.5 million gap. And the year before that, it was like a $1.3 million gap. And the year before that, it was like a $1.2 million gap. There's a pattern here. And the pattern is that we continually get underfunded for what it is that we're trying to achieve. And every single year, if you look at the percentage of our budget that is taken out of assessments, continues to grow. With this budget this year, the assessments will be over 72%. We are funding 72% of our own education just through assessments. That means the taxpayers are on the hook for roughly 5% more than they were 10 years ago. That trend isn't going away, it's just going up. And so we need to take a very hard look at the leadership that we're electing at the state level and decide whether this is the direction that we want to keep moving. Because every single year we keep electing the same people. Every single year we get the same promises, and every single year we get disappointed. Case in point, the Student Opportunity Act. It was promised that it was going to be a windfall for everybody. I don't know who it was, but they sat here holding a big placard check with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Turned out it gave us nothing. But if you look at the top one, if you look at the 1/3 of school districts that receive the lion's share of the money, what we find is that 2/3 of the district in the state get little to nothing. And we are one of the ones that get nothing. So it's great when you make a pledge in the political arena that you're going to fund education, but I think we need to drill down on these people to be more specific, to say, whose education are you funding? Because if there are communities out there that say that they're flush with cash in education because of the Student Opportunity Act, boy, I'd like to see that. So, that being said, I do agree. I mean, education is the single biggest responsibility of a community. It never saves you money. It costs money. But, as Aaron said at the beginning, or at the end of his presentation, what do you value in your community? And if you value education, you have to fund it. And we can be better at being fiscally responsible, but I can't imagine in good conscience ever saying that I'm going to cut all of that and I'm going to feel good about it.
I have some things I want to bring up, but I have a question for Dr. Duncanty first. You said that facilities costs are out of control. Could you please explain how they're out of control?
Well, the facilities costs, we have 2 buildings right now that are, ones that used at like 70% capacity and ones used at like education about 20% capacity. Why are we using 2 buildings below their capacities?
How is that out of control? I mean, yes, we could increase those capacities, but I wouldn't say that facilities is out of control.
Doesn't sound in control to me. If we were in control, we'd have pretty much buttoned up capacities. If we lose control,
Number of students versus
number of students per building. It's, do you think that we have things in control? I ask you as a committee member. Do you think having a building at 70% capacity and one at 30% capacity, do you think that's in control?
Which buildings have 30% capacity?
We've got TWB. Actually, TWB is below 30%.
Yeah.
We have TWB, and then we have Minnetonka Regional. Built for $1,250 or less.
TWB, we wanted to close it, and then we found out that because of the contract that we have with the town, we have to keep it open, we have to plow, we have to mow
We don't have to
down.
keep it open.
We have to keep it open.
But we still have to plow, we still have to keep,
We
because
have to
they're,
expand to a certain level, but we do not have to keep it open.
so I believe that there's other agencies that use that building, so we would have to keep it open.
No, we have to maintain it to a certain level, which
Right.
allow those agencies to still use it. We don't
Right.
have to keep it open as a school.
We do not have to keep it open as a school, but we still have to pay for the facility.
So that's just a maintenance cost.
Right.
But the
It's not just
idea of
maintenance,
moving that
it's
to
a lot.
a 2-year-old program from this building where it could still have been housed, other than the alterations that they made for some of the students because of their placement requirements and their plan, I don't know if it's IEP at that level, but it's like, whatever their plan is.
The reason we have TWB.
They could have been here though. We moved
Right.
that program over there and they could have stayed here.
It's because we had the building, we had to keep it open for those agents, people that were using the facilities. So they said, well, we have the building, why don't we use the space? It wasn't like we put people at TWB and now the costs have skyrocketed, you know? So, yeah, I mean, yes, we can get better at facilities, but I just, to categorize it as out of control, I don't think that's how I would.
So we differ on that.
There you go. I do agree with Patrick that yes, the budget is not what we should be asking, this budget is not what we should be asking for, we should be asking for more. But budget is part of working with the state, working with the towns, and the towns have been very generous, as Dr. Montempi just said, 72% of our budget comes from the towns, and asking a lot of the towns. I would love to ask for more. I would love to increase a lot of our offerings. But right now, we're struggling to match this budget, which is level funded from the year before. I would tell everybody here, everyone listening, call your state leaders, send them an email, send them a letter, let them know that you're not happy. I would reach out to the Board of Selectmen in both towns, Finance and Advisory, and let them know that you support this budget, because this budget here, which I don't think is good enough, is going to be a struggle. Thank you.
Aye.
Cheryl Fairlight?
No.
Sean Kennedy?
Aye.
Patrick Finnan?
Aye.
Lisa Murray?
Aye.
Maura Ryan?
Aye.
And myself, Michelle Bujo, aye. So motion passes 6-1.
Point of order. With regards to the capital costs at Wilbraham Minnetonka, that is going to be a separate article on the warrant. So I believe that we need to make a motion to present that so that it can be drafted to be placed on the warrant.
So I make a motion to draft a second warrant for the capital expenses at Minnetonka to the tune of $428,000.
So do we want to do it as one or do we want to do them as individual?
Oh,
I would like to do
because I know that we may be more apt to, I don't know how it would work at the town level, but it may be more apt for them to be able to vote at the town level which ones they may want to fund and which ones they may not. Just a thought before you, anybody second.
Yeah. So then basically we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you present people with 5 different things for the schools or 1.
So how does it get presented to the town?
So it would get presented for them to list as separate warrants. No, because they would vote on one item at a time.
So if we release it as whatever, it's 5 separate warrants, if we voted as 5 separate, then it goes as 5 separate warrants. Excuse me, 5 separate articles.
Yeah.
That's what I think is supposed to happen, but I'm not 100% sure, and I wasn't able to get it clarified before the meeting.
So we could do it as 1.
We've never, I don't think we've ever done this before, but my understanding of town law is that we draft the article any way that we want.
Well, we have voted on them individually in the past. We did it last year, and we did the year before.
I don't think we've done this before.
I don't think
No, where the capital, because we had to vote on capital expenditures. Remember, there was something for the bleachers, and there was some other cost that we voted to not accept. There were other, I should have brought it with me.
we didn't put an article on the warrant.
I don't know if it was an article, I think we had to make the determination of what was going to be voted to be part of that warrant.
Oh, I think that was the funds, huh?
Wasn't that part of the budget where we had said, because I believe it was the heater in the pool,
That was the year before.
right, it was one of the ones that we had to vote separately on, and then we voted on the bleacher repair.
No, it's not the bleachers, so they were looking for risers in one of
Right,
them.
yeah, porous risers.
Yes, and there was a couple other things that we opted to say no. Again, you can do either way, I'm not trying to confuse it, but.
I thought that was for coming out of the stabilization fund as opposed to asking the town.
Yeah, I didn't,
Not
yeah.
trying to confuse it, sorry.
Yeah, I think Patrick's right, because we've never drafted a separate warrant for capital items for this building, or for any other, we wouldn't for the other building too.
So then should we vote on them individually, and then based off of what passes, it would be what goes to the warrant?
Well, do we have a more likely chance of having everything fly through a town meeting, or do we have a more likely chance of getting more by doing it individually?
I can only speak for the town of which that I was elected, I can't speak for your town.
What are people's thoughts? I mean, I think that would be the question we should ask ourselves, is leaving it, what's the right way to present it?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the people want to know what the bottom number is, but legally we have to present it as 2 different items. So, right? Don't we have to have this warrant separate?
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, but I think what Patrick was saying is, is it more likely to pass, are these capital needs more likely to pass if you were to do them individually? I would probably argue in the counter that if these projects are lumped together, because I'm looking at all of the stuff that's listed here, and like you look at mini split AC units. I mean, we understand the value of those mini AC split units with regards to IEPs and the students who need them. The community may not understand that. And everything that's on here, there's nothing disposable, right? So everything that we have on this list, if we don't pass it this year, it's going to be on the list next year. And there will be increased capital items that are going to come for this building as we go. And if you put I'm looking at the railing as being the biggest one, because that's really a safety issue within the school. So, I mean, it's going to be kind of hard for us to, it would be, if we separate that out, I think that would definitely pass. But then when we look at all the other things, I think it would create a lot of discussion, but at the end of the day, I don't think it would favor having this capital needs list passed.
I'm just wondering if one of the 2 top items, I know that when one of our representatives was here, he talked about if we sent a letter, it's not an endowment, is that what they called it, Aaron, when you wrote the letter to the state representatives? Is that what it's called, as an endowment? Earmark, to see if we could get either one of the 2 of those as earmarked, because to me, I would think that the wireless access points doesn't just impact us, but it's impact across the state.
Just because the town approves it doesn't mean, right, so if we were to secure the funding.
They don't have to spend it on that.
Yeah.
So if anything does come through, and you guys all got a list of the projects that Aaron had forwarded to the, it was good 2 pages, and it was a nice little list, pretty
I
inclusive,
think it
so.
was everything, right?
That's all our needs.
Yeah.
I think that's just year one.
So Sean's,
So continue with your motion then, sorry.
Yeah, so my motion was to accept the creation of a warrant for the Minnetonka, an article, excuse me, for the Minnetonka capital needs to the tune of $428,000.
second. Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, that added discussion, I was just curious.
No,
No.
nothing wrong with discussion.
Thank you, Erica. So we are moving on to old business, school choice, discussion. Yes.
School choice, I think.
Okay.
So we've looked at our available seats, we've looked at, the continuance of the METCO program and how, best to utilize some of the seats we have available. You may recall last year, the committee elected not to increase choice in grade 1 to fund an additional teacher for a 3rd classroom. At the end of the day, the numbers were such that the superintendent felt it was imperative to have 3 classrooms at that grade level. So we funded that out of our ESSER 3 funds. Again, those funds are dwindling fast, and we will not have those funds available next year to fund this 3rd position. So our recommendation is to look again to a choice option. We would recommend across 3 classrooms up to 11 seats. So this is a little bit of a gamble. We might not get 11. I don't think, but I think we're willing budgetarily to make a leap that we might at least get enough to offset as much of that cost as possible. This would make grade 2 consist of 17.5% choice. I knew that question was going to come up. It would then leave Green Meadows at 7.2% choice students. If we were to not do this, we would have 2 grade 2 classrooms of 26 students each prior to the potential for any move-ins. So then looking next at the high school, knowing that there are configurations that are being considered by the planning committee that might move 8th grade to the high school, we are looking to be a little bit more conservative this year than we were last year in terms of choice at the high school. So last year we took 40 choice seats in 9th grade. This year we would like to request 20 new choice seats in 9th grade.
Aaron, didn't we do an additional 40 seats? We did 23 choice, and then you came back to us and asked us for another 40, which would increase the budget in the school choice revolving account by $200,000, $100,000 of which would fund the.
I don't think so, but I can look at that.
It's like 43 total, so it was the original 23, and then the subsequent, I think we're in.
No, but
That's great, right?
I can look at what was approved.
I'd like to go back to that, because if I remember correctly, we did 23, and then you came back to us and asked for additional 40.
Our numbers right now show we have a total of 42 students in 9th grade who are choice students. So whatever number that was, and I don't have that with me here. Okay. I can look that up, but we have a total of 42, I believe. My belief was that we approved 40, and there were 2 who were already choice students moving up through. Okay. That's my.
I think I might have been understanding it. We had already approved the 20, and then the 40 were in addition.
Okay.
If that was the case,
there may have been some confusion in how it was stated last year. So I apologize if that's the case. So then when we look at re-engaging with the METCO program, we would be interested in the potential for 3 METCO seats at 5th grade at Green Meadows School. Green Meadows is about the only elementary where we have seats available at the moment, where we could do that. 5th grade does seem to have some room, and it's a small number. and then 5 ninth grade seats. So we would be bringing in a total of, at the high school, a total of 25 students. I've been speaking with Principal Hale. He's comfortable with those numbers. I've spoken with Principal Moberg about the choice and the METCO seats. She's comfortable with those. So in the back, I have a little matrix of sort of the total number. We have 15 students, choice students planned to graduate this year from the high school. So the net is really just sort of 10 additional choice students. But again, a lot of those would be, phasing out if we did do the reconfiguration.
How many sections do we have at Mile Tree for second grade? How many sections do we have at Mile Tree for second grade?
I believe 7. Oh, well, Mile Tree is first grade. Second grade is at Stony Hill. I believe we have 7 across all of the.
7.
Yeah.
And Sharon, you're okay with these numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Any additional questions, concerns?
Are you going to go through these individually?
Individually.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Individually?
So I have, I'll just make, then we can go through the vote, but at the lower grades, I have some serious reservations. We haven't done a reconfiguration. At the high school level, it's basically, just replacing, it's kind of like, it's a wash, right? So we're bringing 20 graduating, or 15 graduating, 20 are coming in, so it's not that big of a shift, and we only have them for 4 years. When you begin taking a school choice kid, 11 school choice kids in grade 1, they're there for the entire time, so they don't leave. And so if we do any type of reconfiguration, especially with the elementary grades, we have to figure them in. I really don't like the idea of bringing in a lot of school choice kids. I know that it's money, I get it. You're looking at about $55,000. But if we reorganize our district and find that we are overstaffed, or we have a particular grade is overpopulated, or a building, we need another teacher, you're paying twice that amount. So I would feel much better just accepting the high school, and let's leave the elementary schools alone. We've already got a number of kids in the elementary schools, but let's figure out what we're doing with the kids who live here before we start bringing other kids in.
I'd just like to bring up a point that in all the options that were presented today, I think all of the options has K through 5 at Green Meadows, right? So no matter what happens with any of the configurations, they will always be K through 5 at Green Meadows. So with these 11 students in grade 1 and the 3 students in grade 5, they're going to fit there no matter what happens, because that configuration is not going to change. And I think that we're talking about total of both of these is 14 students. I think that we can handle that. And Sharon, please. Yeah. Hey, why don't you use this one?
Don't take that.
This one works.
This is James.
Thank you. So this is, it's not an easy question to answer. All I can tell you is that, I have class sizes of second grade that will have 26 students in each classroom. On average, I have 2 to 4 additional students per year per grade. That could put my second grade class sizes at 28, and that's way too big. And so when you ask me, am I in agreement? I am in agreement because I have no other choice. I realize adding a couple choice, what it does, but I think it is valuable because the class sizes are able to stay small. And to be a classroom teacher trying to meet the needs of 26, 28 students in second grade after COVID, it's too much to ask. And so I don't have another avenue, another option for finding money to, add another additional class. But I would just ask you to please strongly think about what that would look like if we had 28 students per classroom. It's too high, in my opinion.
Okay, why don't you just take this one, please, she needs to reply.
So, thanks for your input on that. The biggest issue that I have with this represents a deviation from how we've utilized school choice in this district, with the exception of last year, which we had used to fund an additional assistant principalship. So this represents a significant change, because every single time that we've accepted school choice in this district, it was done to round out a class size, but it was not going to impact the position. So in this particular case, we're accepting 11 students, but that's with the idea that we are going to create another section. Yeah. So that's what makes it unique.
But isn't it, it's currently, I believe it's currently, so it's a bubble classroom, so right now, we added, so now there's 3 first grades at Green Meadows.
Yep.
So this would then just move it along to second grade, so maintaining
so
the
it'd be
3 classrooms. It's not creating a new class, they already have 3 classrooms, so it's not, does that make sense?
Well, the current budget hasn't been moved. So in theory, we would be,
The theory back to
from a budgetary
2.
standpoint, we would be,
Okay.
now
Right.
it's being offset, right? The argument to that would be it's being offset by school choice, so it's net neutral to the budget, but today it would be an increase, or excuse me, for next year, based on the budget, would be an increase of 1.
Yeah. So we'll create an extra position.
I think the bigger concern, and it may not be popular to say it, we still don't know what the cost of school choice is. And so we are responsible for these students, and they are our students from grade 1 on. So if we look at this rough math, where you're making $70-some thousand off school choice, we could have one student alone that could cost more than $70,000.
Should cost $300,000.
And if we look at it, I just, at the high school level, I feel a little bit more comfortable. But if we're responsible for this student potentially from first grade to age 22, I think the math doesn't work.
Hey, John, forgive me, if a student comes in on school choice and they have some IEP or something like that, doesn't that fall back on their home district?
That's correct. There's a process called the special education increment. Basically what happens is for all of the students who are choiced into your district who have special services that are claimable services, the special education department fills out a worksheet that calculates the cost of the special education services, and then those are charged back to the town that the student comes from. That comes through in your cherry sheets as a sped.
Is that fully funded, so that has not been the way it's been shared in the past?
So I would say that that part is fully funded. You know, when you look at the first part, you might say that the core 5,000 isn't fully funded because, it's less than your per pupil expenditure. But let's say you had the child who was $325,000 because, well, that would only happen if the student went out of district. In that case, the student who was choiced into the district and our district is thinking about placing them out, what happens is you have a team meeting with the sending district saying, this child is choiced here, we can't service them, we are going to place them out, and then you're going to get the bill as a sped increment. Do you want to take them back to your district? Do you have a program that can serve them?
You're talking about an out-of-district placement. What about just?
So let's say, I was just talking about the $325,000 hypothetical. Let's say you have a student who has a lot of OT, PT, speech, those kinds of services that are provided in the district. Again, those services are listed on this worksheet that someone in the special ed office fills out. I used to fill it out. You basically list the kid's name, you put in the grid the number of times a week they get service. There's a multiplier. I don't know what it is now, but when I was doing it, it was like $45 a session for OT, and then you get a number in the end that you send to the state, and then the state essentially takes the Chapter 70 money away from the other district and sends it to you.
So now, I'm totally confused here. So actually, the way that you just described that, school choice is actually better for bringing kids in who have a need for services, because if we use the circuit breaker, we only get 75% reimbursement, whereas if they're a school choice student, is that how I'm understanding this?
I wouldn't characterize it that way, because your special education increments that you're charging back to the district, in theory, is the cost for you to provide those services, right? What happens is the state puts together, after analyzing everybody's wages, sort of an average cost for an occupational therapist, and that becomes the multiplier for each session. So it's essentially a reimbursement for the service you provided. It's not like, and it is at 100%, but it's not the same situation as when you're putting a student out of district and you're paying 100% of the cost to put the.
And you're only getting reimbursed 75%.
And you're only getting reimbursed 7% on the amount over $49,000.
Right.
Is the dollar amount for that worksheet like predetermined? So like I'm saying like OT is like $45 an hour, is that like what it said, or does the district set that?
So most of the time it's like we get the 5,000 for general ed students, 7,500 for special ed students, but if, for example, we have a meeting and we need a one-to-one, we would be able to bill back the other district for that one-to-one service.
But how does the rate get set though? Right, because if you're billing them back for the service, is it like a standard rate that everybody uses across the state, or does the district come up with that service?
That's more of an Aaron question as far as the paraprofessional. Like, we have very few situations where we get students that we bill beyond the 7,500. But if it's a paraprofessional, we absolutely bill back.
Yeah. Right. So it is based on standard rates. So DESE has standard statewide rates for all of those items. It's exactly the same formula that's used for circuit breaker. So we get a reimbursement for those. So, yeah.
So, Bill, Patrick, does that allay your fears?
Not necessarily. What was our reimbursement last year for it?
It's hard to say. I mean, we'd have to go into all of the choice files and figure it out. I mean, that doesn't come specifically on the cherry sheets. I'd have to pull out our full list of choice students and all of the increments they receive.
So I'm a little less hesitant than I was, knowing that, pretty much all the configurations that you guys came up with was K-5. But until we actually have that as the official reconfiguration of the district, I still have a problem with it, because if it's not, and we have 11 students and we're ending up hiring another teacher for those 11 students compounded by 12 years, it's a pretty big expense. So I'd much rather take the loss now, figure out where we're going to be with our students, be sure of our building capacity, and then go from there. We should be able to get additional supports in the classrooms to be able to support the teachers if their class sizes do get bigger. I think the investment on that is a lot better than gambling and ending up with 11 students that may tip the scales for us for the next 11 years.
Well, if you keep in mind, if you're talking 7 classes that we have in Wilbraham now, and you're talking 11 students, if something comes together, it would probably go from 7, 8, 9, and be more classes, and that 11 students would basically come down to 1 student, maybe 2 per class.
Yeah, and until that plan is, until that's what we're doing, until we know that and we voted on that, I have my doubts, and I don't think I'm going to say.
How many movements did you say you're going to get?
Between 2 and 4.
Between 2 to 4 total?
Generally.
So if that would put us 47 in the first grade, which is the second highest number at Green Meadows. So
Can you get the number more?
So that'd be.
Can I clarify for a minute? I'm sorry, that's second grade. That's second grade. That's a typo. That's grade. That'll be grade 2 next year. My apologies. In the grid.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, in the narrative, I say second grade, but in the next page, I apologize, that's a typo, and that isn't first grade, it's second
Right
grade.
here, it says,
So it'd be 63 total second
Second grade,
graders
now
is
it's
what you're proposing, not 47 first graders,
So,
based off of the 2-1 enrollment numbers.
sure. So we're looking, sorry, say again?
So if I'm using the 2-1 enrollment numbers, what you're talking about 63, you're talking about 21 kids in a class, which is very similar to the Stony Hill numbers, would be about 20 and change. So roughly all of our second grade classes would be just under 21 students. I realize it could go give or take. And then if we look at grade 1 at Green Meadows, that's then 18 students if with no movements.
So, where's Green Meadows? Sorry, I'm not used to looking at this.
grade 1.
So they're 36.
Grade 1 right now, the latest date I have on this, is that December 1st, 50? 52.
The February one is 52 in
Yes,
the
52, so that
first
would,
grade.
that,
36 in kindergarten.
yes, so in first grade, okay, so 52 in first grade, next year would be 52 in second grade.
And you would assume 63
Right,
when you
and
add
broken
your
into
school
two classes would be 26 per class, right?
And then if you go across the 3, it's 21 per class with the 11.
If we, yes.
Okay.
I still think we're going backwards if we look at first grade classes and second grade classes that are 26, 27 as opposed to 21. We're going backwards from what we said.
Did someone make a motion? I forget, was it seconded?
No,
Okay.
Hey, I'm not suggesting that we maintain two sections when we talk about additional support. I just, I think the budgetary vehicle that we're using here, it's a train that once you put it on the tracks, it doesn't stop rolling until it gets to the end. So it is a risky proposition. You're expanding the class size, you're inviting another teacher. That will continue on throughout the grade levels, right? So we invite those 11 students in. So let's say if you got, let's just say for weird reasons, right? You got 5 move-outs. All of a sudden, you're not at 52, you're at 47, which means you're now down to 23 and 24 per class. And so those 11 students now drive you down to 17 or 18 per class, which is great for the teachers. But again, we're not maximizing with it. So I'm not opposed to the idea of adding the students. I just don't like or adding the teacher. I just don't like the vehicle of adding 11 students, adding a teacher, because we'll have to do it this year. We'll have to do it next year. We'll have to do it the year after and the year after.
So with your numbers of losing 5 students with those 11 students, it comes out to 20, 19, and 19. So it doesn't go down to 17. That's in
2019, 19. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean that's
still below
40, 58. Yeah.
What do we receive per MECO student?
8,000. Aaron?
Sorry, Aaron, there's a question. Oh, sorry.
Do you know what we get for MECO students?
So the numbers we have for METCO will really only maintain our current funding and won't gain us any funding. On average, though, if once we do get to our 130,000 that we've got in sort of hold harmless, it is about 8,000 something a student. I want to say 8,500 a student. So if we were in the long run to expand our METCO program rather than doing choice, that would be a win in the long run, and many districts are endeavoring to do that. the challenge becomes, I mean, right now, we don't gain much traction. We don't gain any traction for adding METCO students. We just maintain what we've had, and that's the problem.
We're basically held harmless and we're still given the, what is it, 130,000, right?
130,000.
Yeah.
But if you were to take all 34 at choice and flip those to METCO,
I don't know how many METCO are available, right? So it's more of a gamble. We have not done, they do a draw. We work with the city of Springfield to do a draw. And that will probably not happen until mid-April, I think. So right now, they're taking applications, I think, through early April, and then once they have those applications, they will be in touch with us. They principally, METCO principally is in early grades. They principally start the early grades. So we may, you know, we're pitching for 5 there. There is more of a new pitch, apparently, for high school students. So, you know, opening those seats for high school and just having a few at Green Meadows for now is kind of how we're just hoping to maintain our whole harmless status.
So is there the chance that, say, METCO could come back to you and say, hey, you know, you guys offered 5, you guys originally said you could offer 5, but we actually have the need for like 8 or 10? I'm just using it as a hypothetical.
That possibility could exist if that came up, and we looked at numbers and they were in the right grades. We could do that. I mean, if we haven't filled choice seats, we may have that conversation by that point.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Make a motion to accept the school choice increases for the 24 school year of 34 and the METCO increases of 8.
before I make a second, I thought we were doing it individually.
Oh, scratch that.
There were no other questions.
I do have another question.
Sean, before we just, sorry.
Usually you have the motion, then you have the question? Whatever you want to do.
Okay. We were just like mid-conversation, so I figured.
Oh, I thought it was done. Okay.
If you want to make a motion, that's fine. I'm happy.
I can make this one question.
Good, that's great.
Was last night Road to Kindergarten?
Yes.
How many students do you have in Green Meadows for kindergarten right now enrolled? Or is it too early to know? Do we have a projection on what we think that kindergarten class size will be?
I think it will be on a smaller side based on the census for Green Meadows.
That's for Green Meadows, that's what I'm trying to understand. Do we have a ballpark number?
Not yet.
Okay.
I can say that currently in Wilbraham, first grade is at 144, kindergarten is at 151. So, and then across Stony Hill, 143, 162. So it looks like that 150 is really an average number, with 140 being sort of on the lower end.
So I make a motion to accept the school choice increases for the 2024 budget of 34.
Individuals.
Oh, we're going to do
Meadows.
each? Yeah. Okay.
Third time's a charm, Sean.
So I make a motion to accept the school choice students for Green Meadows, second grade of 11 students for the 2024 budget.
Discussion. Questions, additional concerns?
No,
Okay. No, I just. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-3.
I make a motion to accept the school.
Oh, sorry. So motion carries 4-3 for 11 choice students for the 24 school year, 23-24 school year, for grade 2 at Green Meadows.
Mary, did you get that? Who's in?
Oh, sorry, my microphone's not on. So motion carries 4-3 for Green Meadows to accept 11 choice students for grade 2 for the school year 23-24.
You got the yeas and the nays? Okay.
I make a motion to accept the school choice increases for the 2024 budget for Green Meadows for 5th grade of 3 students.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a typo as well. It should be just 3 Metco students. I apologize.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
What changes the whole
We just
number?
have 3 Metco students at grade 5.
So 41 students based off 2-1. 41 based off of 2-1. Okay.
So it's three only Metcos.
Okay. So can I amend that to be Metco students and not school choice?
Sorry.
Discussion? Oh, Cheryl.
Cheryl, seconded.
Why do we vote Metco at each grade level?
I don't know as though we have to. I thought it was fair minimally. I'm, as I've said, new to the program. I'd rather make sure with an abundance of caution that we have those votes in place.
In the time that I've been on the committee, we haven't had any new Metco students.
Yeah.
It's been many years before we
Yeah, so the last 2 were finishing this year.
But I want to say when I got on the committee 4 years ago, we had a conversation about it. I was trying to find it in the meeting minutes because we had a conversation about not continuing with Metco. So I don't know what that meant for our finance and operations person at that time. Like, I'm not going to hold you on that. But, and maybe they didn't go out to Springfield to say, hey, we'll take those students. Because we stopped bringing them in at the elementary level.
Yeah, I think Patrick's question just had to do with whether or not you actually had to vote on them, whether we.
Right.
Because we're part of the program.
At one point it came before us and we opted to not participate.
Yeah, I don't, we can look at the minutes for that, but to be safe, I would just vote on it.
Yeah, I'd just rather be safe. I have a bit of a learning curve on the program, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I think I was voted the director last meeting, so.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so motion carries for Green Meadows to accept 3 Metco students for the 23-24 school year.
Make a motion to accept school choice students for the 2024 school year for Minnetonka Regional High School, 9th grade of 20 students.
Second.
Discussion.
Can I make an amendment to that?
Yes.
So I would word it, school choice and Metco up to 25 students, such that if one goes bigger than the other, we're not locked into 20 and 5. So it's the same 25 seats.
Just want to offer that as an amendment.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, sure. Do you have a problem with that? Oh, good.
Fair enough.
So that would be school choice and Metco students at the Minnetonka Regional High School for the 2024 school year, up to a total of 25 students.
Discussion?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0 for Minnetonka Regional High School to accept up to 25 students of school, up to 25 school choice or Metco students for the 23-24 school year.
I need to excuse myself on this next one, I can't go on it. We'll put this to the conversation.
Okay. So we are moving on to the preschool fee increase. Gina.
So it's just to increase the fee from 3,000 to 3,300.
I make a motion to increase the pre-K tuition from 3,000 to 3,300
Second.
for the upcoming school year.
Second.
Questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? No, we don't have to, okay, sorry. All right, so motion carries 6-0. To increase the, okay.
Maybe before we go into executive session, have a biological break. I have a friend over here who's going to explode if she doesn't get to a bathroom.
You
So-
can tell with it, right?
So what I would do is I'm gonna go into if I could, I'm going to read executive session. We will go into take a 5-minute break, do executive session, and then when we return, we will just quickly return to adjourn. So we do have the need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, C, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of public body, and the chair so declares. See, and then there's a possible vote.
So moved. Need a second?
Second.
Okay, so we will do roll call vote. Bill?
Yep.
Cheryl? Yep. Sean?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Maura?
Aye.
Okay, myself, aye. We're moving to executive session with a 5-minute break, and we will be returning to adjourn. Thank you.
So.
Go pee.